Hi, I'm Stu Kagan. Welcome to Born Scrappy, the podcast for scrap metal exporters and traders. Join me in conversation with some of the most experienced traders and operators that have helped shape this incredible industry. In today's episode, we're joined by Tom Bird. Tom has been in the metal recycling industry for pretty much all his life, starting in the family business while still in school. Up until a few months ago, he was president of the BIR, and he's held many senior roles in the industry, including managing director at Sims. He has recently started a new exciting venture in the industry called Enicor, which we learn a bit more about in the episode. So without any further delay, let's jump into the episode and hear more from Tom. But first, intro. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Stu. Good to talk.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And great to have you on Born Scrappy. We've been looking
Delighted
forward to
to
this
be
for a
here.
while. Yeah, so thanks
Great.
for joining us. Tom, I know you're traveling at the moment, so let's kick into it. Tell us a little bit about your latest venture. I know, obviously, having been the president of the BIR, and then obviously you moved on from that. But this new venture looks really exciting, and I am following it on social media. So give us a little bit of an update there.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Yeah, right. Well, look, it's really exciting. And I suppose, in my time in my career, having worked all over the world and in the corporate structure, if you like, and had a very enjoyable and successful career at that, I felt it was time now to sort of get back into it and do something for myself. So I came back to the UK, and I'd been in touch with a business, a shredding business, a couple of shredders, and a very successful business, BW Riddle, over the years. And I've been in touch with them prior to me going and traveling on my last venture. And I came back, reconnected with them, and I decided that it would be a fantastic opportunity to buy the business. And the business has been successful over the years. We're extremely excited about it. It's a great platform for further expansion. Myself and a gentleman by the name of James Bowers from KJB Consulting, I've been doing a little bit of stuff with James before. I've been introduced to James while I was at Schultz and Cheeho, and I came back and reconnected with him. And then I've sort of thought about it long and hard, and I said, you know what? I said, putting his business together with this might just be a good opportunity. We explored that avenue, and then we engaged with a company called Harwood Private Capital, who've been extremely supportive, private equity company who very much liked our vision. And we bought the business, and here we are today, and it's been very, very successful for us. And it's a great platform for further expansion. We have two shredders, great site, three locations in the eastern part of the country, and we have our head office in Sheffield, which is continuing with extensive works in demolition and remediation work in the steel work. So it's a very separate type of business. And at Born, we're shredding on two different shredders, producing large amounts of Zorba each month. We're doing a lot of iron aluminium, which enables us to produce large volumes of Zorba, as well as traditional shredding. We have a shear, we have dense media separation, magnetic separation, all that good stuff, polishing plant, the complete package. And we're delighted with the way it's going. And as I said, it's a fantastic platform for future expansion. We've rebranded recently as Enicor, which has been very successful, very well received. And it's been great sort of opening up the new markets that we're looking at as well for our product. Great team of guys as well. There was a good infrastructure at KJB, which allowed us to bring in very good traders to pick up from where Colin Riddle, who was the former owner of the business, who's also been very supportive in the transition period. And James Bowers, with a very strong trading background as well. And James, actually, ironically, when I was at Sims, he was actually at the company when I was there. I didn't actually know him because he was one of the junior traders there for the short period that we overlapped. So it's quite ironic now that we're sort of working together. And so far, it's been great. Very, very good. Very, very happy with the way it's going. Awesome. Probably the timing on the market, Stu, hasn't been great when you look at when we bought it back in April. But hey, markets go up and down. So, we take the rough with the smooth. But very pleased with the way it's going, and onwards and upwards. And as I said, perfect platform for further expansion. And we are looking at a number of other transactions as we talk at this moment in time. So very excited.
Look, if you can get it right during the tougher times, it just makes it really exciting when the market turns, right? We know it's in cycles. And when the markets move, if you've really got this business to operate the way you want it to, that's when you really reap the reward.
Absolutely right. Yeah, it's maintaining your customer base. They're the most important people, And I have to correct myself often when I'm talking to people in the financial markets, when you're talking to banks and you talk about customers, they think you're talking about, the end users. Well, of course, they're customers too. But for me, the most important people are the guys that actually supply us with the material, because without them, we don't have a business. Yeah. So, in our industry, customers are both our suppliers and they're also the people that we sell the material to.
Yeah. I actually saw a post, I think it was earlier today, from James of your Zorba, saying you guys do a few thousand tons a month from Zorba, like you touched on. But wow, it was some of the cleanest Zorba I've seen before.
It is.
What sort of process? You gave us a high level, but what sort of cleaning process have you got going on there?
We put it through a polishing plant. So what that basically does is you have your Zorba, your traditional Zorba, your 98.3 Zorba, and then what we do as well on that, we can process it further. So we actually produce a 99% product, and we put that through the plant. It's through a trommel, through some dust extraction, extra magnetic separation, some further limited manual picking. That gives us access to better markets, and it enables us to sell to areas where you can't traditionally sell with material. I mean, that a lot of material anyway is probably going into Southeast Asia and being cleaned up and then moved on elsewhere, but we're actually doing that at source, and I think that gives us a great advantage.
Yeah, there's probably a lot to be said for that. I mean, I remember when we made Zorba 7 or 8 years ago when I was still in South Africa, there was no similarities to the Zorba that we're seeing today. You could get away with whatever the percentage of waste was. But nowadays, it's got to be really clean. And those pictures I saw today, if I was buying Zorba, you'd be the first person I'd be ringing.
Well, thanks for that. That's good to know. But I also think when you take a look at what's happened over the years, quality requirements have increased and improved, and rightly so, And quality is important. And with the regulations that have come in different parts of the world, and also with the requirements, even on the ferrous side and steel mills in Europe now, and Turkey particularly. We used to be shipping material into Turkey 15, 20 years ago that you just couldn't do today. The requirements have increased, have improved, and I think that's a good thing, and the equipment out there to do it. So it's all about your efficiency of your operations to make sure that you get the right kit in to produce the right product.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, I want to focus a bit on the export trade side of things.
Yeah.
And I like to learn through other people's difficulties, failures, whatever it might be. I think that's where we learn more. I think success is a terrible teacher. So can you think of a trade that you've had real difficulties with or had an experience with that was a really tough one to deal with, and how you learned from it or what you learned from it?
Yeah, look, I think probably rather than just say any specific trade, I think it was a specific time, if I'm being honest with you. And that was when you look back to when we had the issues back in 2008. We had a large amount of material that was sold on the export market, and the market literally crashed, as you remember. You may or may not remember. I don't know whether you're around. You're a lot younger than me.
I was trading at the time.
Yeah, it was a difficult time. And I think one of the ways to approach a situation like that we did was that there's no point in sitting there saying, we have a contract and therefore you have to honor it. It was just one of those situations where you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And you had to find a way through it. And you couldn't just forfeit everything. So what I firmly believe is you have to come to a compromise in these situations. You will find yourself in situations when you're exporting material where the buyer has no options. And there's no point in pushing him into a corner and saying, if you don't, because it's going to get you nowhere. You have to find a solution. And you have to trade your way out of it. Understand what I mean by that? So in other words, you get yourself into a situation where you compromise and you say, well, look, you can't take it at this, but let's soften the blow. Let's find a way that we can trade our way out of this. We'll continue to supply you material at the market rate and we'll drip feed it. And that's what we did with a number of transactions. And we can come on to how you deal with certain challenges in trading in a minute, but that's what we did. And it proved to be a successful route. Sitting down there, calling lawyers, forcing people into corners isn't going to work. And that was a particularly difficult time for the industry per se. We know what happened then. But we took a very pragmatic view when we were trading and when we were dealing with people, both on the ferrous side of the market and the non-ferrous side of the market. I mean, we had cargoes that were due to go out. And I can say this, and I'm quite proud of this, actually. We were loading cargoes out of the UK that were going into Turkey at the time. I'm not exaggerating. We were loading those cargoes, in excess of $300 above the current rate. But they were still taking them because we'd said, look, we'd sold other material on the way down to make sure that it softened the blow for them. And, it was a tough time, but that's the way we found the solution. So I think to answer your question, without any sort of specific one deal, there was a number of deals. It was like a tsunami at the time. And it was like trying to navigate your way through it and how best to do it. And it's about compromising, not pushing your buyer into a corner where he's got nowhere to go and it's pointless. Sticking to the contract and coming to a compromise. And I think that's what you've got to do when you're trading, is that sometimes you're both in the, what, up to your neck in it. And then you have to find a way out of it that satisfies both parties. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think
that makes a bit of sense.
Yeah, 100%. And there's the whole idea of we both need to win on every trade, but sometimes we both need to lose as well, instead of one party taking the full loss. And just to clarify, when you spoke about trading through the issue, right? I think that some people might not have understood that. But what that means is, as far as I'm aware, is that when the market crashes, if you commit to the buyer that you will carry on selling to them at these lower prices, they can then average out their stock over a period.
Exactly right.
Which is very difficult for them if you just sell them that parcel at 300 tons or $300 a ton more than it is today and stop selling them. So I think, Tom, what you're saying is a massive, massive thing that we can all learn from. When the market crashes, and you worry they might walk away, whatever, go to your buyer and say, I will carry on trading with you even with these low prices.
Exactly right. And I remember there was one gentleman, he's no longer with us now, and I had a huge amount of respect from him, a gentleman by the name of Alan Crowe. In fact, there were three, and then three are no longer with us. And I'll name them by name because I think they deserve to be. And there are three people that I have enormous respect for, and they were people that I would listen to intently. There was obviously Philip Shepherd from EMR Group, was a tremendous person. And Philip was one of the pioneers of the industry in the early days and an incredible trader. And there was Nigel Clarkson and Alan Crowe. And they were both from Mayor Newman, Mayor Parry, and Nigel then went on trading his own. And Alan Crowe, particularly when I spoke to Alan, he would always say, when the market's going, sell it, When it's going, he was always the first one through the door when the market was coming off. When the market's coming out, everybody's reluctant when the market starts to dive. They don't want to be the first ones to actually sell. They're always a bit reluctant. They don't want to be the first one to break that price, Whereas he wasn't like that. He always said, the market's the market. When that price goes, sell it. And it was listening to people like that had that sort of experience and were not scared to take that decision. That when everybody else may have been holding back or pulling back or deciding not to do something, he was always the one that was in there, first at the door, sell the cargo. And those three gentlemen, those three guys, Nigel Clarkson, Alan Crowe and Philip Shepherd, they were fantastic traders and people that I would watch and listen to and took a huge amount of interest in what they had to say. We all need to sort of look at people as mentors in the industry. And I worked very closely with Nigel right up until, he passed. And it was really important to listen to these guys that had this experience. And that was the one thing that they all said, when the market starts to go, there's no point in messing around, get it done,
Yeah. I was always taught that the money's made and lost on the front scale. So you should continue selling. As long as you are moving your buying price accordingly with the market, there's no reason to be holding on. So I agree with that.
And my father used to say to me exactly that, Stu, because he was in the industry as well. And I sort of come from the family background within the industry. And he would point at the weighbridge and he would say to me, if you get it wrong there, no matter how clever you are out there, you're never going to make a bean. And he's absolutely right. In other words, if you get it wrong when you bring it in the gate, no matter how much equipment you got, no matter how clever you think you are with your processing, if you don't buy it right, you got a problem. And I think that was always something, again, that stuck in my mind. That's the most important part, as you quite rightly said, is the scale.
Yeah, exactly. Tom, you mentioned your three chaps that you might consider mentors or people that you've always spoken to. When we talk about collaboration in the industry, it's something that I speak quite a bit about. I feel that we don't necessarily reach out enough. I feel some people are nervous to reach out to others. And I think we could collaborate more. Is there any examples that you've had of collaboration over your time?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I have absolutely no problem in reaching out and asking. And I think as an industry together, we're stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think sometimes that what happens is that people tend to be quite sort of insular. There's this sort of, I mean, to an extent, it's the nature of the trader as well. When I sort of manage traders, they always seem to be like, ranking this, have this stuff, and they're frightened to say what this bloke or that bloke's doing because they're going to lose this customer, that customer. Whereas, I'm a great believer in, if you've got an issue, pick up the phone, reach out, ask, collaborate, talk. One example I suppose I can recount of that was when it was not so much a trading issue, but it was a huge issue for the trade. And that was when they're in the UK, going back a few years now, they basically came out and said that that shredder waste, as it was at the time, just regular shredder waste, was to be hazardous.
Right.
And this caused a huge, huge issue for the industry. So I, along with a couple of other companies, I reached out and we said, look, what we should do is just stop taking cars. You can't do that. We can. We can if we all do it. If we all get together and stop taking cars, then we can do something about it. I said, well, we've got to stick together on this. And we've got to have the balls to do it. And we've got to not worry that one of us is going to break ranks. And that's exactly what we did. And we actually stopped taking cars. And I remember being interviewed by one of the trade press, because it made big news. This is going back a few years now, Stu, and it made big sort of news with the press. And it was just, if you remember, the CFCs and the fridges were all being stockpiled in different places. And it was having a bit of an issue in the UK press, fridges everywhere. They were called fridge mountains. And I remember saying to this one press journalist that rang me up, and I said, listen, if you think the fridge mountains are big, there's going to be a car Everest, And of course, that got back and it really peed off somebody within the government. But to cut a long story short, they relented.
Yeah.
And we actually, things got back to normality. So I think that was probably an example when I look back sort of in my career where, it's a prime example of where collaboration and where as an industry, if we stick together, we can actually get things done. No matter how big your company is, when you're actually collective as an industry, you have much more weight, you have much more oomph with whoever it might be. So I'm a great believer in collaboration at the right time, without question. Stick together as a team. We're always going to compete, of course we are, but we can still collaborate. We can still collaborate with things that affect us as a whole. Very much in support of that.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant example. I'm really happy to hear that, because hopefully it gets more people to be talking together, getting together, helping them make decisions to fight against certain regulations that might be coming about, or whatever it might be in different areas. And I'm hoping that just gives them a little bit of more confidence that they can reach out.
Exactly right. Very important. Don't be frightened to do that. Ultimately, we're in the same industry. We have the same interests, big or small, and I often say that it's important that as a collective industry, also the smaller operators, have more weight too. And I'm extremely, keen that should be the case as well.
Tom, you've been doing this for quite a while. When did you actually start? What year did you start it?
Well, I mean, as I said, my family business was in the business. So, even during school holidays, I was working in the yard, driving the equipment, doing everything. On the picking belt, driving the cranes, loading everything. Right. And then I went to university, and then came out of university. Then I went into the family demolition business, and I was sort of cut my teeth really on demolition. And then back into the recycling industry. So if you exclude when I was at school doing it, I suppose, full time from 1986.
Okay. Wow.
So, a fair few years now.
And you've got a lot longer to go. I mean, it's really exciting, the new venture as well.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. But what would you say has been your career highlight so far? And what do you think got you there?
Look, I mean, I've had a very enjoyable career. It's been a fascinating industry to be involved with, and the people that I've met, some great sort of characters in the industry, and people that you've interviewed yourself that I've worked with over the years, people like Michael Lyon and the names that I've before, the family business as well that I was involved with. And I guess for me, it's nice to be sort of recognized, I suppose, for sort of your contribution. Being president of BIR was a big thing for me. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I took that very seriously. And to be, recognized by your peers and elected into that position, for me was great. I mean, for me, that was one of the highlights amongst many, to be sort of recognized and elected to that position. And I'd like to think that it was a pretty decent 4 years, unfortunately right in the middle of COVID, but
I was about to say, I mean, you did one of the hardest 4 years as well.
It was it was pretty tough, yeah. I mean, it was a lot of work. And I suppose, fortunately, with the COVID times, it was at a time when we had to concentrate on getting things right for BIR and to tell people we were more than just about a couple of conferences a year, which I've said. So a lot of time put into it. Great support from the team there. But I think we did pretty well, all said and done. And so for me, it was undoubtedly a highlight amongst many.
Yeah, it definitely came across during that period that you were more than just a few events. I've been going to the BAR for many years when I was previously in South Africa as well. And I had only recognized you really as just an event. And then all of a sudden, during COVID, you guys came out with a huge amount of information and really assisted the industry. And definitely recognized you more than just those events. So well done for that period. That was really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And Tom, you've been doing this, as we just spoke about, for a long time. If you were to give any tips to exporters how to optimize their trading strategy a little bit better, what would those be?
I would say do your homework. Okay, do your homework. And by that I mean, make sure. We talked about collaboration before, right?
Yep.
Don't be frightened. Don't be scared to ask about who you're dealing with. Particularly if somebody new comes on the horizon. It's important to do your homework, make sure that they're the right people to be dealing with, get a knowledge of what they're doing, check up on them, be prepared, Don't just come out because somebody comes and posts a great price at your doorstep and you think, that looks interesting. Because you get a lot of guys out there fair weather traders, as I call them. Yep. Do your homework. And that's something that I think is extremely important. And not just necessarily in supplying, Stu, We're often offered material as well from different places. And do your homework on that as well. I can account a situation that I sort of helped somebody out with where they'd bought some material out of the US, funnily enough, and they had real problems at the end of the day. Non-performance. It was just an absolute debacle. The people they were dealing with were complete and utter, they were just bottom trawlers. And to cut a long story short, I said, well, did you check them out first? And they were buying shredded scrap from these guys out the States. They didn't even have a shredder.
Oh, wow.
So they'd clearly bought the material from somewhere else. It's the first thing. I made 2 calls and to check up on these guys. And then I made another 4 calls. So that's 6 calls altogether. And every single one of them said, for God's sake, steer clear.
Stay away, yeah.
So, that was an example of a trade out of the US where everything looked fine, but don't assume anything. Do your homework. Make sure who you're buying from, if you're buying material and you're trying to trade it, and also who you're selling to, whether it be a trader or even an end user. Make sure that you've done your homework, whether that, if you can visit, fantastic. Sometimes it's not always possible to do that. But if you can't do that, pick up the damn phone, have a word. We're a pretty transparent industry. Don't be afraid to ask somebody what their opinion is of a certain trade. And you can sometimes see through that. Maybe they don't want you to deal with them, but you can pick up that if you've got the trading instinct. But certainly, as I would say, without sort of repeating myself, be prepared and do your homework to make sure who you're buying from and who you're selling to, A, can perform, and B, are bona fide operators.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit more to elaborate on the homework, but I think you have. I think to sum it up, it's the due diligence that you have to do on the buyer or the seller. Make those phone calls. I think the phone calls can get a bit tough. It takes me back to the collaboration conversation that people don't feel comfortable in this industry for whatever reasons. I think it's more about the previous generation or maybe the one before that. But the new generation, I think hopefully are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable reaching out. But I do believe that it's reach out, contact people that these guys have traded with before. You'll find out, like you said, within 2 phone calls and then make another 4. You'll find out very quickly whether you should or shouldn't be dealing with these buyers.
Exactly. And it's interesting because, as an industry, you picked up on a very important point just then, Stu, where you said the reluctance that we've had as an industry historically to collaborate. And I think that's one of the reasons why, to an extent, we find ourselves as an industry where we are at the moment. I think that we're a fantastic business, a fantastic industry that is at the forefront of environmental improvement, carbon reduction, all of that good stuff. But we've been hopeless at getting that message across because we've been so happy to keep our heads down. That's been the nature of it. Don't tell them what you do. Don't tell them. Don't tell them. And that now we're having to play catch up. We're having to get out there and tell the world what we're doing. Tell them the importance of our industry. We were green long before it was fashionable. I know I keep saying that, but we were. I told somebody yesterday the very same thing. Long before it was fashionable. We as an industry don't need people to lecture us about environmental. When you look at the carbon reduction, when you look at the savings that we're making from the material that we're supplying the mills, the electricity power savings, the waste that we are recycling, all of that stuff. We don't need people to lecture us about environmental responsibility and sustainability. But we've got to get that message out there. But I think it's something that doesn't come natural to us as an industry. We've been so happy, as you said, you touched upon it yourself, you said it. People have been so reluctant to sort of, pick up the phone, collaborate, talk together as an industry. I'll get on with my stuff, you get on with your stuff, There is still the element within our industry that's like that tries to cut corners, but that is changing massively. And it's not in our interests as operators to support that type of activity. And that's why the national associations, companies themselves, huge change over recent years.
You touch on how it's all changed and how there are less and less of what we would call bad actors in the industry. I often relate it to sport. I'm sports mad, specifically rugby.
Like me, yeah.
And I go and I say, you can't punch somebody at the bottom of a ruck anymore and think you're going to get away with it. There's just too many cameras.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah,
it's a perfect analogy. I mean, I'm a great rugby fan, rugby player myself, like yourself, and you're absolutely right. I mean, what we used to get away with when we played. I mean, I was watching some old footage of a Lions game the other week, and you just, and you see it on YouTube, don't you, on social media now. Imagine that happened today. You just would never get away.
You wouldn't be allowed on the field.
Taking the heads off. And it's very similar to our industry. It's the same thing.
Exactly right.
Things have moved on. We can't do what we used to be doing now. It's a much more professional organisation. Environmental regulations are much tighter. We talked about quality earlier on in the call.
Yep.
All those things have changed. And, even if the inspector's not there, you still got to make sure the material's right. And there's nothing that infuriates me more. I mean, we still get it. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
We've been in situations where we've bought some material recently. Again, I'm not going to mention any names. We bought from a supplier and the material just wasn't to spec, wasn't any spec. I was just furious about it, just furious, just so unnecessary. And it wasn't our material, but as a broker on it. And you do get that still, unfortunately, in the industry today, as I'm sure, your listeners and your viewers will have the same thing. So you're never going to get it out. There's always going to be people out there that try it on. But you're quite right. Things have changed and you can't operate the way we used to operate in the past.
How do you become a preferred exporter? So, I mentioned earlier about the Zorba that you guys are now producing and it's super clean. That immediately in my mind would make you, with any buyer, a preferred supplier. Other than just cleaning your Zorba, what other tips could you give for an exporter who wanted to become a preferred supplier and therefore receive a premium price?
I think it's interesting you talk about premium price. What I would say is, I think for me, it's always been being able to sell it. Premium price, you might get a couple of bucks here and there extra potentially, but it's all about being able to sell it. And I think one of the things as an export, you've got to perform. Now, if you say you're going to perform within us, perform, but also be, as I said, we talked earlier on in the call about compromise. If there are going to be issues, be transparent. Say, look, we've got an issue. You might have production issues. You might not make it to the timeline that the cargo is, or the consignment, whatever it might be, be due to ship for whatever reason. Work with the exporter on that. Compromise with it. Don't give them any surprises. In other words, keep performing, keep the quality right. You're always going to have a few issues with quality, but when you do get an issue with quality, make sure that you're prepared to negotiate, sit down and sort it out with them. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face, as they say. I defy anybody is not going to have a quality problem at some stage. It's just going to happen. And it's about how you deal with that and to make sure you keep that continuity, to make sure you're prepared to sit down and negotiate. But it's about performance. That for me is the most important thing, is saying what you're going to do and performing to that, and regardless of what happens to the market. If you're supplying and the market goes up $200 a ton, you still perform to that contract. You might go for the minus percentage on the contract rather than the plus percentage, but that's okay. But nevertheless, perform to it. Because if you don't, reputation gets round, and it doesn't take long for a reputation. We're a small church, this industry, and people talk, and it gets round. And I think that's very important. And the other thing as well is that if you are going to be trading material as part of your portfolio as well and supplying, make sure that if you're going to do that, you're comfortable with those that are supplying you of the quality, because if not, all your quality is going to be branded the same. You understand what I'm saying about that? So you might be supplying pristine P&S from one of your yards, and you've traded a bit of material from somebody else that's full of, crap, for use of a better term. People, as far as they're concerned, that's come from you as well. Yep. So be very careful who you're dealing with in terms of, to supplement your own tons. Very important.
Yeah. And I had it, I used to run the trading for 85 different yards in Southern Africa. And you can even have it in your own company, right? But it's the exact same story. Certain divisions might jeopardize your company or your trading company's brand. So you've got to be very careful. And that's spot on what you're saying. Like, we would have a yard who, for whatever reason, and sometimes it's because they're short of stock and they're trying to make up for it by throwing sand in or something like that, right? And that's where you start to find some real issues, which you didn't know you had either in your company or somewhere you're buying from. You can't really, I guess it takes me back to, you've got to know who you are dealing with. You've got to be very sure if you're buying it, do your homework. Exactly right. And you spoke about, when they claims come. Claims are always going to come, whether we like it or not. You're always going to have to deal with claims. And you very quickly get a reputation for how you deal with those claims. If you are one of those people, in my opinion, that stomps their foot down and says, we don't accept claims and we would never load that, whatever the pictures are, whatever, you're just not going to be able to do good or have good dealings with those people in the future. So it's very short-term mentality for a long-term loss, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you've got to be sensible. I think there are occasions, though, where, the consumer or the buyer will try it on, of course.
Absolutely. Markets come down.
And then you've got to stand your firm.
100%.
So I'm not suggesting you roll over in every situation. Of course I'm
Definitely not.
Because there are times when and that comes with experience. You and I both know full well when somebody is trying it on with a market movement. Okay.
Well, I've had it done to me.
Of course
on a few bulk vessels.
Of
when
course
the markets come off, it's horrible.
Absolutely. And you've just got to stand firm. And that's where you do your homework, you deal with the people you want to deal with. And that's another important point, that when the markets are a bit, let's just say, a bit iffy and so on, make sure you deal with the people you can trust as well. You're going to have a whole load of people on your thing, and you're going to have your premium guys, you're going to have the guys that you're going to have the guy. And you go, well, you know what? I think I'll probably, this one's going to go to so-and-so. Okay, I might be leaving $3 or $4 on the table, but I know that come rain or shine, this guy's going to take it. I'm not going to have a problem. This guy is going to cause me a few problems if the market comes off. You get to know who they are. Doesn't mean you don't deal with them, but you get to know who they are. And when times get tough, you pick and choose who you're going to be dealing with. And I think also when particularly when you're doing certain vessels, it's got to be absolutely watertight on your quality at load, port, final. Make sure that everything is agreed and everything is done there, particularly that spot. And then you can put your foot down and say, no, I'm sorry. Your guy was here. We've been through this. We've told you to send whoever you wanted to send here to look at this. You decided you sent 3 inspectors. You've done this, done the other. Don't now come to us and tell us there's a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got to put your foot down on a. Of course you do. Of course you do.
And Tom, I spend a lot of time on social media. A lot of people do nowadays. Is there anybody that you have your eye on? Anybody that you're watching? People that are pushing the boundaries out there at the moment that you could tell our guys about or tell our listeners about?
I think social media has been. It's funny because we talked earlier on, didn't we, about how the industry traditionally has not liked to sort of keep its head down. And I suppose social media has turned that round. I mean, if you look on social media today, more and more people are posting out there and seeing the importance of it and seeing, how, companies such as, who's pushing the boundaries? It's difficult to say, really, Stu. I think a lot of companies out there doing a lot of good stuff, flying the flag. I think that we're quite active on social media. If you take a look, I think what has been fantastic for the industry is what Sierra have been doing, John Sacco. And I think that his work in terms of the industry and getting the message of the industry across with his Great Repurpose series, I think has been fantastic. And I think that has educated. In actual fact, a couple of the episodes I've actually shown to the banks.
Oh, wow.
To actually show them what they're doing. And they loved it.
Brilliant.
So I think what Sierra have done and what John has done has been fantastic. I think that, EMR, big company, very active on social media. A lot of the stuff that they put out is good stuff, always active. And I think, traditionally the bigger companies have been more reluctant to go out into the public domain, unless the public limited companies such as Sims. When I was at Sims, we had to go out, as we're always out there because we're a public company and it's a completely different mindset. So I think that we can witness on social media what's happening and how the other companies are pushing out to cutting edge. To single out anybody, I've singled out John, I mentioned what some of the bigger companies are doing, but to single out anybody specifically, cutting edge, many companies are looking at that. And I think the pressure on, talked about quality, getting things right, export regulations, end of waste, all of that. We have to, as an industry, progress, continue to develop, become more and more efficient. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And how have you seen the industry change over all these years? And where do you think it'll be in the next 10 years?
God, I've seen some changes. Yeah, I mentioned names from the past earlier on in the call. And I have a huge amount of optimism for the industry going forward. That's the first thing. Let's talk about going forward. I think that as an industry, we are essential. And we proved that during lockdown. We got this, we were regarded as an essential industry. But that aside, if you take a look at the importance that we are and all of the things that we need to achieve in decarbonisation, climate change, all of that stuff, whether you necessarily agree with the timelines that are being introduced, I think the timelines to achieve zero carbon, personally, I think are unrealistic. I think we need to be sensible here about how we approach this. But nevertheless, we need to aim our efforts and focus our attention on getting there, but in a sensible timeline. So I think as an industry, if you take a look at the products that we're producing, and we're dropping the word scrap, as you now know, because we're trying to recycle raw materials or recycle steel and all this good stuff, because that's what it is. It's a raw material. It's not, it's utter madness that we're included in the waste sector. It's ridiculous, but that's a conversation for another day. So I think from an industry, the demand for our product is going to continue to rise, which is positive. So as a sector, as an industry, very, very, very optimistic about the future. And I was asked a question the other day saying that, well, aren't scrap prices sort of, following steel prices? And when the steel price, I said, look, traditionally that has been probably the case. I said, but that correlation is going to be reduced as time goes forward. Well, why is that? I said, well, look, think about it. I said, steel is always going to need to be made, whether it goes up and down in price or not. And the proportion of steel scrap, of steel, recycled steel, I did it again, I got the word scrap, recycled steel, that's going to be necessary in making steel is going to increase. So if the proportion of recycled steel is going to increase, then that's going to minimize the impact of an up and down market in the steel price is concerned. I'm not saying there won't be an impact, but the impact's going to be far less because there's going to be a greater proportion of recycled steel used in the steel making process. And I think that's a very important thing to point out. So I'm very optimistic about the future. I think if you take a look at what it was like in the past, I've seen huge amounts of consolidation over the years. We had a sizable family business bought by a steel mill, sold by a steel mill, bought by Sims, forms the core of Sims in the UK today. My whole family business does. So that's an example. You take a look at how EMR from Shepherd to Coopers to EMR. I remember when there were Shepherd, Coopers and Birds in the UK, the three big, and Mayor Newman. Right. Okay? Mayor Newman, Shepherds and Coopers are now EMR. Birds is now part of Sims UK, along with McIntyre's, along with Lord and Midgley, along with those. So it's been a huge concern. Take a look at the same in the States. You've seen Baltimore Scraps has been bought by Sims. You see what Sims have done. You see what SDI have done. You see what, SA Recycling, my good friend George Adams, I mean, you touched upon the industry earlier on. You touched upon about, if you name one company that has progressed tremendously over the recent years, that's SA Recycling. I mean, the job that George Adams has done with that business has just been outstanding. And you see the way that business has progressed. I've visited the operations. I've had the privilege of visiting a couple of the operations there. And, they are the absolute pinnacle of scrapyards, of recycling operations. I could use it again, the word scrap. Can't get it, you see, I'm an old head.
Wow.
But fantastic business. So, to answer your question, really, you asked me before in terms of a business that's cutting it out there. SA Recycling is way up there with that and the job that they've done in the US. That's how the industry's changed. Huge amounts of consolidation with some really top-rate operators. And, take EMR, take SA Recycling, George Adams, so on, top operators and how have consolidated the business.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the optimism. I'm generally very optimistic, so I'm extremely optimistic about the industry. So it's really good to hear coming from you as well. On that note, that'll be it for our conversation about recycling. But I would like to just finish off with a little bit of getting to know Tom a little bit better. Yeah. Just some quick questions to understand you a bit better, know you a bit better. And then next time everybody's at the event or the BAR, they'll run up to you and tell you that they have the same favorite location or book or whatever it might be. So let's start with, what is the favorite TV series or movie?
Oh, crikey. That's my favorite. Goodness me. TV series or movie. I loved Breaking Bad.
Okay, good.
I mean, that was fantastic. Yeah, Breaking Bad. I actually enjoy a thing called Animal Kingdom that's on Amazon. It's like made after the Australian movie. I enjoy that. Movie, goodness me. Movie. My favorite movie of all time. You want to know what it is?
Yeah.
On the Waterfront.
On the Waterfront. Tell me more.
Marlon Brando.
Wow.
Goodness knows how many times I've seen it. He's basically a fighter, boxer.
Right.
He's mixed up. His brother's mixed up with the mob. They run the waterfront in New York with the mafia, made back in the 50s, and they control the union, and he breaks the union. Lee J. Cobb is the union boss in there. Rod Steiger is his brother. Just a great movie. And,
sounds good.
Yeah, On the Waterfront. Watch it. Black and white. Cracking film. Sure. I mean, lots of other ones, but if one stands out, I've always said On the Waterfront.
Yeah, awesome. Good. And favorite place to visit? You've obviously traveled a lot in your time, lived in many places, but favorite place to visit?
There's so many. Goodness me. Favorite place to visit? That's a good question. I say one of the nicest countries I've ever been to was Slovenia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We had an operation there when I was at Schultz, and lovely place, lovely country. Ljubljana, the capital city. It's got everything there. It's got, I said to the guys working there, you got the best job in the company. I said, the yard is just overlooking these beautiful hills and mountains. Wow. It's a mountain range. You've got skiing an hour away. You've got waterfront beaches an hour away. It's just, so Slovenia is a beautiful country, but there's so many different places. I love the US, I got to say. I love America. My father had a business there. And when I was at school, I was at boarding school, I used to go home to America. So America's got a big place in my heart. I'm very comfortable there. I like America very much.
And what's your favorite book? Are you an avid reader?
I tend to read sort of books that are, I'm not a great fiction reader. I like non-fiction books. So like autobiographies and things like that. So many. I couldn't describe anyone specifically, but I like books about reality. Okay. Rather than fiction, I enjoy that. So autobiographies, I like very much. Got you.
And do you have a favorite quote?
He who denies his past has no future.
Wow, it's pretty impressive, Tom. It's very good. I like that a lot.
That's my favorite quote. He who denies his past has no future. If you try and pretend that you weren't, if you deny where you came from, and you ain't going to go anywhere. You got to accept what you are, where you came from, and if you accept that and learn from it, then you got a future. If you try and deny it, forget it. So he who denies his past has no future.
On those wise words, that bit of wisdom from Tom Bird, we can end this episode. That was brilliant. Love that, Tom. Thank you so much for being on Born Scrappy. I've loved every minute of it.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.